You're listening to Jack of All Trades, Master of Nothing, a podcast that celebrates those who do a little bit of everything. We bring together creative people who followed the unconventional path, pursuing multiple trades, sometimes at the same time. So get ready to be inspired, because as the saying goes, master of none is often better than master of one. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Jack of All Trades podcast. It's really good to be here. I hope everybody's enjoying their last days of summer here into fall. I've been recording a lot of these episodes out of order, so I would have recorded the interview that you guys are about to listen to a few weeks prior to doing this intro and outro, but I'm really excited for you guys to hear this. Today we're going to be talking with Laura Henry. And Laura, I was actually recommended to Laura by a friend, Steph Park, who's actually also on this season of the podcast. And Steph recommended her to me a few years ago, actually, right when I'd come back from the Cabaret National Tour. I was in New York City and was looking to find out how to truly be an actor. I don't think graduating from a bachelor's of fine arts musical theater degree necessarily always lends itself to truly understanding acting, or at least to the school that I went to. So I was entering the audition arena again, not really feeling like I knew what I was doing. And at the time, I think it was about 2017 or something like that, she recommended this teacher to me. And, it took me a couple years to actually call Laura up and really start to pursue this. I kind of got caught in the cog of the audition wheel and was doing mass amounts of auditioning and not really doing the most quality work that I could have, and kind of drained myself into a hole. And then the pandemic happened, and then I started season 1 of this and started gathering information from other artists. And at some point in, I think it was, when was that? Is it 2020? I think it was 2021. Yeah, about this time last year, or maybe earlier. Yeah, so maybe spring 2021, I texted Steph again and was like, hey, who was that acting teacher that you recommended to me a while ago? And she was like, oh, Laura Henry. And then we reconnected, and honestly, my life has changed since then. It's just been so cool. I know I'm going to sing her praises throughout the episode, and I think she hates when I do that, but I do it anyway because I mean it. But Laura is good. Actually brings up a couple important factors in the beginning of the episode that I want to address. The title of the podcast, Jack of All Trades, Master of Nothing, again, as a reminder, was a way for me personally to take the power back of being brought up by a dance educator who was horrible and relatively abusive to me. So she used to call me that, and that's why I decided to take the power in making my podcast that name, although that doesn't even make sense. Jack of all trades, master of nothing. That's not even how the phrase goes. But I think it's important to acknowledge that sometimes I bring on people who truly are masters of their craft, and Laura is most definitely one of them. And we're going to talk about it a little bit at the beginning of our interview. But I think for people, not just for those who pursue a lot of different things and listen to this for inspiration, just to hear about how other people make it possible to do multiple things, I think it is important to truly hone your skill and hone your craft. And especially if you're in a place of exploration, like say you don't really know what it's like to be an actor, but you've always dreamed of it. Or say, even if you're a musical theater artist in New York City, right? There's a lot of different things to focus on. Like I would say musical theater as a craft is very much jack of all trades, because you have to sing, you have to dance, you have to act. It's really important to listen to masters who have honed one area and they've become masters at that. I think it's really important to listen to them and hear what they have to say, study with them, and decide for yourself, hey, maybe doing multiple things isn't working. Like I've even at this point, having so many things on my plate, I'm like, okay, you know what? I need to bring my focus here, or I really truly want to become good at this one thing. So I think it's okay to explore, and I'm all for pursuing multiple things personally. But I don't want to deter anyone from the importance of studying something seriously, and also appreciating and honoring those who have mastered things such as acting, and how we're going to hear Laura Henry talk about that is quite awesome. So a little on Laura right before we launch into her episode. Laura is a Meisner technique teacher, and she truly helped me understand what does it mean to be an actor? Like, what is the art of acting? Like, actually, not, I mean, everybody's different, right? She's going to talk about this. Everybody's going to come to acting in their own way. They're going to use different ways of acting to get the job done. But at first, when I first started the Meisner technique, I wasn't so sure about it. I had studied it very briefly in college, but I wouldn't even consider at that point having studied it. We barely even touched the idea of Meisner. We really didn't even get past the repetition. And, you know, a lot of actors that I have talked to in New York who hear about the Meisner technique, they just talk about repetition and how they don't understand it or how, you know, it doesn't speak to them. And having gone through multiple levels in Laura's class, it's something, Meisner 1 is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, because actually when you really get into the work and you really do it, it brings up a lot. And again, it's just one of those things Laura's going to talk about. You just have to do, you have to put into practice, and you have to like physically experience it to understand it. But I can't recommend this method highly enough, or Laura's teaching highly enough. She is someone who cuts through to the truth, and at the same time, while holding people accountable for their potential, she also brings out the best in people and does so in such a nurturing way. So any people considering taking classes, highly recommend. I'm excited to let you guys hear what she has to say about acting. She'll say a lot of actors don't really explain acting very well because they just do it. And I think she's right. So without further ado, I'm going to let her explain it to you. And here is our conversation with Laura Henry. Okay. Hi, Laura. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Sarah. I'm glad to be here.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we're kind of catching up there a little bit, and you mentioned how you don't like the title of the podcast, but I don't blame you, because I understand.
I don't like the title of the I don't like the title, except in the way that you learned it, but it sounds like you might be advocating that.
What, just not mastering things?
Yeah. And I don't actually agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's okay. I mean, you are certainly what I would call actually very much a master of what you do.
Well, thank you. I've been doing it a long time, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
But I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited for people to hear you talk, because you're just like one of those people that, and I'm not exaggerating, listeners, like that when you go to Laura Henry's class, it will change your life. And I like actually for real, like not joking. I'm not over exaggerating. Like, that is legitimately what happens. So I'm just so pumped that you're here and that you sat down with me today.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for saying all of that. But like, you don't need to say anything like that anymore. I'm fine. I just want to talk to you.
Okay. All right. Well, here, I'm just going to start to ask you some questions, just so that our listeners can get to know who you are and what you do a little bit.
Sure.
I usually start, it's a pretty broad question, but you can be as specific as you want. Just asking you a bit, kind of an abbreviated version of like your background and your upbringing, and specifically what led you to your love of theater in your younger life.
Oh, I love acting. Well, I actually grew up in New York City until I was 5, and I had a younger twin brother and sisters, and my dad was in advertising, and on Saturdays, from the time they were born, he would take me to the theater. So not every Saturday, but from the time I was 4, we would go to a Broadway show or an off-Broadway show probably twice a month. And I think it was a way, he loved the theater, but also it got us out of the house because my mother had 2 young babies. And so I really loved it. It really was a wonderful time with my dad. And it also taught me a lot and entertained me a lot. And I got to see tons of musicals. And that is where I really started to love acting. My grandmother was a singer, my mother's mother, and she was on Broadway in the 20s as a singer. And it's how my grandfather met her, because he saw her in a show and they fell in love and they got married. So that was always a romance story from my childhood. And my grandmother had a beautiful voice and sang all over the house all the time. She wasn't singing professionally then. Once she got married, she didn't sing professionally. So that's sort of the history of that.
Do you remember your very first show that you ever saw with your family? I know you've seen a lot of theater being raised near the New York area, but what was your very first show, or maybe a show that stuck out to you from your childhood?
What the first one I saw when I was 4 was? Is that what you asked?
Yeah. Do you remember?
No, I don't. I know I saw Ethel Merman, and if my father was still alive, he would tell me. I know I saw the Luntz. I should look that up chronologically, and I could figure it out. I probably should have done that before you interviewed me, but I've never been asked that question before.
That's okay. That's all right. I can't believe that's amazing that you saw Ethel Merman.
I saw Ethel Merman all the time. I mean, she was. I'm old, so she was around. But I saw the Luntz. That was pretty amazing. I saw some people who I know. I was in an acting class once when I was about 15, and the teacher talked about this particular production with the Luntz, and at that time I remembered what it was. And I said, "Oh, I saw that," and she basically called me a liar.
What?
So that was not so great. That also taught me a lot about teaching acting.
Yeah, what not to do, an accumulation of learning from other teachers.
Yeah.
I wish that I had lived closer to New York. My first Broadway show was Shrek in like 20.
Oh, so cute. But you're much younger than I, many years younger than me, so that makes sense. Well, we lived in the city, so until I was I think almost 6, and then we moved to Long Island.
Yeah, so even still on Long Island though, like you would have been able to go and.
Yeah, but it wasn't. I mean, I did, but it wasn't the same as my father having to get me out of the house, so my mother had time with the twins, and that became a wonderful weekend habit.
Okay, cool. And now I remember in class you mentioned that you went to like a performing arts high school that was really well known at the time, and that's.
Yeah, I went. I don't even know if it was that well known at the time, but it was called Wickham Rise, and it was in Washington, Connecticut. And the headmaster was dating Nureyev at the time. So that's not why it was a good art school, but it was a really great place. And I went there for junior and senior year of high school. And they had an affiliated program with Juilliard because Juilliard was bringing in, I think it was 5 Korean string players who were all in high school. But the government wouldn't let Juilliard do that unless they had a high school for those women. They were all women to go to. And so Father Newton was the name of the headmaster, and he worked out a deal with Juilliard where they could go, because Wickham Rise was a boarding school in Washington, Connecticut. It's no longer there. It was shut down. It closed in the 80s. But a lot of great artists came through there, really, really great artists. It was a wonderful, wonderful school. And so those Korean students went to school in the morning from like 8 until noon for high school. And then they were bused into New York. And in those days, the traffic wasn't as bad. So I think you could do it in a little under 2 hours back then. This was in 1972 or 73. No, 75 when I was a junior in high school. And so the exchange that Juilliard gave Father Newton, because he said, well, you've got to do something for, with some other part of the program of our art school. And they had an amazing dance program and a fine arts program that was incredible. And we had this theater program, which was really, really good. And Sydney Edison was the woman who ran it. Then there were other teachers. Washington, Connecticut was a place where a lot of artists lived. So Lillian Gish lived there, and Arthur Miller lived there. And they would come and see the plays we did in the theater department, and they would have us over to their homes.
Holy crap.
It was really amazing. So what he did, he said, basically Juilliard said, well, the only people we can give you are people from our drama department. So we had a Juilliard teacher come every Tuesday and teach us. And then we were allowed to be bussed in on Saturdays and take classes at Juilliard, which were sort of random classes. But it was not like I went to Juilliard, because I did not go to Juilliard. But I benefited from much of that, to the point where a million years later, when Gerald Friedman wanted to hire me to teach at University of North Carolina School of the Arts, which he did, and I did from like 2004 till 2011. I realized he had taught me. He was one of the Juilliard teachers that we with either on a Saturday or on the Tuesday when they would come out and work with us. And one of the things he said to me when he first came out to watch me teach at my studio in Los Angeles, because we didn't really remember each other, which was pathetic on my part, because I mean, I loved Gerald and I knew who he was, but I forgot he taught me, right? Pathetic. But he said, "You teach like I do." And then we realized that I studied with him.
You're like, oh.
Which is one of the greatest compliments I'd ever gotten in my life. But also, it's really interesting, that lineage.
Yeah.
Because I did study with him, which doesn't mean that's why I taught like him. I just, many years had gone under the bridge at that point. So that's where I went to high school. And it saved my life, because I was not so great in school in my freshman and sophomore years. There was a lot going on in my family and that time of our world.
To have something that, as a young person, you can go to and start to find, like, I don't know, when I went to college, I really finally get to like focus on the things that I really truly want to do. And I think for young creative people, that's so important.
That actually happened at the school I went to first, but not really because of any teachers there, but I was always very driven. So I would find ways to do what I needed to do. Of course, at that school, I'd sneak out of the window and go and watch the Rolling Stones in Boston. So I don't know that really has to do with the education, but it does have to do with the complete person. That's
That's like awesome though. Anytime you've told us in class, like, oh, I used to do this and that, like,
oh, please, I don't say that much.
No,
do I?
you don't,
I don't.
but you just said how you snuck out to go see the Rolling Stones.
Yeah,
and I'm like, that's awesome. And you're like, I think it's, I wish I like got to sneak out and go watch the Rolling Stones.
It was the time. It was the time.
Did you see any other like just absolutely iconic live music productions during that time too that you like?
Oh, of course. Oh my gosh. I was supposed to go to Woodstock, but I was surfing at the beach and I stayed longer and I missed my ride. And I was really too young to go to Woodstock, so it's good that I missed my ride, but I was devastated. I had to watch the whole thing from the television set.
Oh my God.
But I was, yeah, I'm not as old as I sound. That I was too young to go to Woodstock. I mean, I have two children, and I was married to an actor, and he's the father, and wonderful guy who we got divorced, but he was a good father, and I would never have let them do all the stuff that I did. But it was the time it was the 60s and the early 70s.
Yeah, from when my parents talk about growing up at that time as well, they talk about how much different it was for kids to just be kind of let loose in a way.
Yeah.
And I know there were a lot of like messed up things that happened later, and obviously like for child endangerment, parents now kind of like really keep an eye on their kids because they have to.
You have to. It was a different time.
Yeah, so there was no way I was going to get away with sneaking out to see Lady Gaga. We had to ask permission. Parent chaperone. Well, that story, oh my God. We went to see her in Pittsburgh and we brought my sister, and I think it was like me and 3 of my high school friends, so we were going to go see Lady Gaga. And my sister, we didn't realize had appendicitis at the time.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and so she had like an appendix attack. Basically, it didn't explode, but we didn't know that's what it was.
Oh my gosh. Was she okay?
She was, but she passed out like during the...
So you took her to the hospital. You left the concert, right?
Yeah, but like they thought she was like taking drugs or something, or was drunk or something.
Oh.
And we were like, no, we're only 15, we're like, we're too young.
Oh, wow.
But
Yeah.
she was okay. But like, that's, that was only, I really envy, how many like live performances you've gotten to see, and all the theater you got to see growing up. Cause
Well, I got to see a lot because I grew up on Long Island,
yeah.
and we had the Pavilion, which was the place that was from the World's Fair, which was also wonderful when I was young. And then we would just take the train into New York and go to the Fillmore East and different places like that. So I saw a lot of bands, which was really wonderful and a great part of my artistic life, actually.
Yeah, as you know, I teach voice now, and we learn in voice how, um, so much of someone's early development in their brain and how they perceive pitch and rhythm, and
Hmm.
is so important in the formative years of the brain, and what kind of music the kids are listening to and everything. Like, do you think in a way that has something to do with the art of acting as well, like watching quality, like you said, improved your eye? Like, do you think that had some kind of influence on like really just like appreciating it to a deeper level than maybe some of your peers?
Well, I think that, first of all, when I grew up, I was in third grade when Jack Kennedy was shot. Was I in fourth grade or third grade? I always think I was in fourth grade. I was in fourth grade. And don't forget what he did. I mean, more than any president, I think, although I think Obama did a lot, for the arts was unbelievable. We had such access to arts education in private and public schools. When I was in fourth grade, I was in public school, and I had been since kindergarten. And we had the greatest choir. We had singing teachers. We had dance. We had art. We had theater. We had everything. And I was really lucky to be born when I was, because there was more arts education, I think, when I was growing up, for everyone. Everyone was expected to partake in it, even if you were a jock. It wasn't some separate, it was a very important part of education: fine art and music, dance and theater. We have to jump up and down to try to get money for it now, but that, to me, that's what every child should have:
Yeah.
very strong arts education. And I attribute everything I've ever done to the fact that I was so well educated and also had so much access to the arts. My parents were very interested in the arts. My dad was in advertising, but everybody I knew was. No matter what their parents did for a living, they were surrounded by it. And a lot of that happened because Jack Kennedy was president, and Jackie was in there too, doing so many things for the arts. We don't have that. We started to have that again, and then the AIDS epidemic happened, and all these artists were killed or died. And so losing that many artists during the AIDS epidemic was just such a blow to the arts in this country, because they were activists. And so I think one of the reasons I love teaching is because I feel that the work that I do helps facilitate more artists into the world. And I don't want to sound pompous or anything like that, but I love that. We need more artists who, and in my field, I do the best I can to have them really know what they're doing, and that gives them confidence, and that gives them joy, I think.
Oh, absolutely. So there's a couple things I want to say about that. I want to get back in a second to how important it is to instill confidence and the idea of knowing what you're doing specifically as an actor. There's some people in the world that are born like knowing very naturally how to do it, right? But then for some people that come to it later in life, like myself, I would say like I had no clue where to start, where I was going. I kind of just, was honing it in, trying my best. But, it took really just like truly studying it. Again, we're kind of back to the title of the podcast, that one thing that's not beneficial from pursuing many things is that sometimes you don't get the opportunity to really sink in to truly explore what one thing is at a time. And to that, I say you just kind of need to devote periods of time to each thing. Your focus might have to change and stick to one thing to sink in it enough to at least like really get involved in it. And I think I hadn't like really taken that time until I had met you. I just was like kind of nebulously like, oh, I guess this is fine, but wasn't booking and didn't feel good about it. So I'm just like so grateful that I found you. And then the other thing I wanted to say was that for the arts and education, and as far as like the younger generation not having as much access to that, I don't know if you knew this, but do you remember Junior Miss? Do you know what that is?
Yes.
Yeah, so I was Pennsylvania's Junior Miss. I went to
Oh,
yeah, I
wow.
went to America's Junior Miss like in 2011 or something. And let me tell you, I don't want to be political by any means. But it was a rather conservative program, and it was a kind of against at that time what I stood for in a way. So that made it a little tough, but I did get to go to nationals, and I had to, have a platform. And so my platform at the time, they were just absolutely slashing the absolute crap out of our arts education in our high school. And so my platform was like raising money specifically and awareness for the arts programs in school. And I won a scholarship from that, which was fun. But like it was great. Like I ended up getting paid for the work that I was just doing just because I cared, and again, not trying to be like, I got an award, but it's just like it's important for people, if they really care about something like that, to speak up and like do something about it, because I think unfortunately it's like the importance of that and the importance of the exposure is fading because the kids aren't even exposed to it to begin with now. You know what I mean? Like they don't even have access to it in the early stages, so they don't really even sometimes know what they're missing, I think. With this newer, like I went back and taught some of the younger kids, and it was like they had never had the opportunity to fall in love with it. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the pandemic.
Mm.
And a lot of that, as I said, has to do with money being taken out of arts education and arts in communities. It just should be available to everyone, no matter what socioeconomic situation you're in, no matter where you go to school. It should be a very important part of the curriculum, and a lot of really hardworking teachers and principals across the country work to have that, and parents to have that be a part of the curriculum. Two friends of mine and I started the Getty's program, art literacy program at my children's school when my children were young. And it was phenomenal because just the exposure of one artist, and you study the artist, and then you do an art project based on the medium they worked in, and then these kids know who those artists are. And it was, but we had 60 volunteers. Everybody worked their butts off doing that. But that's what a lot of communities do that, and a lot of communities don't have the money or the time, and a lot of parents can't do that because they're working when their children are in school. So I think that it's back to making it a top priority. I just think it's a human right. So that's where museums are great, and any kind of arts programs that children can be involved in. It makes them understand it and love it. And it's a history of whatever country. When you go to Europe, and that's in everything they do and everywhere you go. I think that the exposure is what allows people to discover what where they have talent, where their interest is taken, what they gravitate to, and then they can pursue it. The only thing I think about anything you do as an artist is you just have to do it.
Right.
You have to do it. You can't think about it. It requires energy and action. If you know what you're doing, then you don't need to study acting.
Yeah.
And if you go, I don't really know what I'm doing, then maybe it's a good idea to, and it doesn't really matter who you study with, as long as what you're learning makes you feel clear and, frankly, most of the time happy. It can be very frustrating to study acting because you just have to let yourself go and get to the bottom of the truth. It's all about telling the truth. Jimmy Cagney said, "Hit your mark and tell the truth." That's absolutely right.
Right.
Really listen. Learning to listen is something that some people have to learn. Some people really already know how to listen. But when you look at some of the great actors who really know how to listen, Philip Seymour Hoffman and Frances McDormand, and the list goes on and on. Meryl Streep. I mean, there are a large number of people who are just wonderful, wonderful, great actors. But they know who they are, and they know how they feel about things, and they're constantly discovering how they feel, and they really listen. And without that, you don't really have anything as an actor. Because, they did a study in the 70s of the amount of adrenaline that's produced in a human being when they get up in front of people to do something or to speak. And they found it's the same amount of adrenaline that's produced when you come upon a tiger in the jungle.
Oh my
as a
God.
human being. So scientifically, or rather physiologically, when people go, "Why am I so nervous?" There's a reason for it. So then you have to know what to do to offset that. And it's to really do truthfully and really allow the other person to be in charge of you on a certain level. That's through the listening.
I had another professor in college that I just loved as well. But there's something about having an amazing acting teacher, and I know you're probably like, "Man, you don't have to say that, Sarah," but I do, because I mean it. And in that, there's a space that you, as a teacher, create, and sometimes people are so resistant to it. I mean, I myself felt so resistant to it, especially level 1, Meisner 1. That was
Yeah.
like, oh my God, like it was just everything in my body just did not want to tell the truth. And there's a level of bravery that it takes to tell the truth, but there also is a space that you, as the teacher, create to encourage and allow the student to feel safe doing that. And that, I think, is so rare, and so it is a big reason why I think people learn so much from you, is because of your ability to like communicate with them, and like you just always know what you there's your bullshit meter, pardon my French, is like the best. Like literally, I've never met anyone that like can detect honesty so clearly in my whole life.
Well, I don't know how to respond to all that except to say thank you. But I all I know is you never teach the same person twice.
Yeah.
People have certain characteristics that might be similar to someone else, but I really firmly believe there's no competition in acting, because when you're really yourself and fully yourself, and you have the freedom to do truthfully. I mean, we don't tell the truth in life all the time. Obviously, we see a lot of people lying today, but the truth is, it's we're not impolite, we're not rude, we're not trying to hurt people's feelings, so we don't always tell the truth. But in acting, you have to tell the truth, and so as children, we're taught that hurts someone's feelings if you say that, even if it's the truth. Your parents are having you grow up to be citizens who get along with other people and can get things done in the world. So that's not exactly the same as acting. And it's just that you're in a cocoon or in a safe place in an acting class, and also in a play or in a film, because this is the world of the film. This is the circumstance of the scene. I have to treat that like it's real. This is the relationship in the scene. This is what I want in the scene. I have to treat that like it's real. And I have to tell the truth through all of that. And so there's no competition, because how you feel is not necessarily what another person feels, and not necessarily what another person feels. It's how you feel in the imaginary circumstance of the scene, in the piece, and you tell the truth. All we want as casting directors or directors is for you to be yourself, and then there's a lot of different things you can do for character work But the first bridge to character work is the emotional connection to the character from my perspective. Not everybody teaches that way, and that doesn't mean it's bad or wrong. It means you're just coming at it a different way. But at some point, you've always got to come back to, who am I? How do I feel about this? What does this mean to me? And how is that different for the character?
As far as like finding an acting technique or that works for each individual person, I think a lot of us go to, I went to CCM, right? I went to a big BFA theater school that has, a reputation for musical theater and all that. But I think to instill a sense of autonomy and self-trust in each person and what they're learning, especially if there's any like prospective theater students that are listening to this. Like personally on my journey, I had to almost discover that I had like permission in a sense
Well,
to like weed out like what actually worked for me, and that was my own problem. But
no, that's not a problem. I think everybody goes through that. Everybody's different. Everybody's different. But it's a safe place to work. Class is a safe place. And then you learn that sets are a safe place. Even though they feel like, oh, I'm here doing this. And you go, yeah, I'm doing it. I'm really doing it. That's the thing that saves you, is that you treat it like it's real and you really listen. It's really those two things.
Yeah. That's interesting. That I'm glad that you said that, actually, selfishly, because you've said that to me like a bajillion times in class too. But I'm in a show right now, and I think it's easy to forget when all of the other pressures of, oh my God, they're gonna rewrite the scene, or like, I don't know if this is working, or someone's watching. It's easy to, like, if you're not practicing constantly all the time, like, what is my job? What am I supposed to be doing here? And just focusing on that, it's easy to get sucked into a bunch of other BS.
Well, but then you have to say, what am I doing? And if you say what you're doing is noticing what they're looking for, thinking about what they're going to change, worrying about something else, then you're not actually doing what you set out to do in that reversal. So you have the total ability as a human being to get back on track when you go off. And that's the key to knowing how to act, because it's not like we're all perfect and no one's ever going to make a mistake, quote unquote mistake. I don't think there really are that many mistakes. It's that I notice it and then I go, oh, so now I just have to put my attention on the other person, really listen and truthfully respond, or do whatever it is I have set out to do in this scene. So it's really just being with yourself and being clear about what you're doing. And then it's really fun. It's so much fun.
Yeah, it really is. You feel like, didn't you say it feels like you're flying?
Yeah, it always feels like that to me. It feels like that when I'm doing it. I don't really act anymore, but I feel like that when I'm watching the actors work, because I don't know what's going to happen next, and neither do they, and that's excellent.
Yeah. I think before I took your class, I'd heard that before, like, you have to be so in the moment that you don't know what's going to happen. And I don't think I knew what that felt like until doing the repetition work.
Yeah. Well, you really came a long way with that work, and you did wonderful work. Yeah, but it's like anything. I mean, it's like a dancer wouldn't sit on a podcast and say, well, here's the thing. I could leap however many feet in the air and cross a room a million times, but I never did pliés and releves.
Right.
They would never say that. And when people are doing pliés and releves, of course, in a dance class, dancers understand that's absolutely crucial. And crucial from the beginning to train my body to take the hit of the fall or the jump or the leap. And I'm not speaking correct terms of the terminology, but they know that. They would just, it's like a musician saying, I never practiced my chords or my riffs or my whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm a great guitarist or I'm a great pianist. Well, that's not true.
Right.
But in acting, when the work is good, you don't see the work. you're very clear when you go and watch a great dance piece. I'd like to do that, but I don't have the ability to do that because I haven't trained.
Right.
And the same is true for musicians, you know. But with acting, it's interesting because we all, thank God, experience empathy when we're watching an actor work. We feel what they're feeling, and we're taken to places by that actor because they're going there. And so maybe we're mourning somebody who's passed away, and in this particular scene, they are dealing with the loss of spouse or a parent. And suddenly we absolutely let all our feelings out about it because of that actor. Well, that makes us feel like we know how to do it sometimes, especially when we want to act and we have talent, right? But then we don't know how to replicate it. We don't know how to access it necessarily unless we've taken the time to study and learn that. Whether we do it on our own or whether we get in a class, I think it's better to be in a class because then you're up in front of other people and you're doing it and you're learning it from somebody who knows how to teach, right? But it doesn't matter how an actor does it. They have to learn how to do it.
Right. Well, because otherwise, if they haven't taken the time to really, truly train, and
But I'm saying everybody's got their own path. There are certain actors who never really trained, but they could watch it, understand it. It's part of their talent. It's part of their, I mean, you have to have your voice working for you. You have to be in your body. That's why I am a really big proponent of the Alexander technique and of the Linkletter voice work. I think those two disciplines are wonderful. I was lucky enough to have wonderful Alexander teachers and Linkletter voice teachers at my school in Los Angeles for many years. And then I worked with people like that at UNCSA and in New York. And it's crucial. It's very important.
yeah, Laura, could you actually tell us a bit about how your studio formed in LA? Like, what was like, how did that come to be? Like, did it start with just like you were coaching your friends, or and then it?
No. In the 80s, I guess it was 85. I worked at the Gately Poole Acting Studio on Theater Row from 1985 until 1992 when I moved to Los Angeles and opened my own conservatory program there. But I teacher trained with Kathryn Gately, and I taught at the same time I was teacher training. So I am forever grateful to Kathryn. She was a wonderful teacher. She's a wonderful person to learn how to study with. I mean, to teach this Meisner technique. And she's a dear friend. And so when my husband was on Broadway and he wanted to go to LA to do some television. And he was a singer on Broadway in a lot of different shows. And he wanted to go, so we went. And when we went, I was going to focus on my directing when I was there because I was directing a lot at the time. And instead, I decided to open a school there. And it was very successful. I was very happy. I was there from 92 until I went to teach for Gerald, and I think it was 2004.
Oh, wow. So it was around for 12 years?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. It was called the Laura Henry Studio. It's the same name. And then when I went to teach for Gerald, I broke my 2-year program up into 7-week intensive classes. So like Meisner 1, Meisner 2, Meisner 3 that I teach now in 7-week intensive classes, that was the first year. And then Scene Study, Advanced Acting, Impediment Workshop, and the Audition Technique are all second-year classes.
Okay. Also, this is like just a personal, like me just asking you, are you going to be teaching those classes next year too? Because I'm like just literally.
Oh, yeah. I'm in New York. I've moved back to New York now. I'm teaching in person. I'm just finishing my first Meisner 1 class here. It ends this week, actually, on Thursday. And I'm teaching advanced acting and I'm teaching audition technique. So the audition technique is online because I have people in LA and people here. So that class might stay online for a while. Yeah, and then I'm starting new classes in the fall. I was supposed to be directing a play in the fall, and the funding just fell through for that. But we're going to be able to do it next year. John Reese is producing that, and he's in it. It's a wonderful play called In on It. It's by a great Canadian playwright named Daniel McIver, and we had a wonderful team together, put together by John Reese, and but we've just lost all the funding for that, so that's got to be postponed. But it's going to happen next year. So I am free to teach in the fall now. So I'm just about to schedule all my fall classes.
Yeah, let me know when you do
Well,
that.
my website is laurahenrystudio.com, and I really don't do much advertising, but I've been told I should do a little advertising now. I've never really advertised; it's all word of mouth. I did at the beginning because I could, because when Sandy was alive, you couldn't say you were a Meisner teacher unless you had learned to teach it with certain people. Kathryn's one of those people. I was always able to advertise, but I really never have. It's just been word of mouth. So.
Well, I mean, people who listen to this I'll link actually your website below how this is posted. So
Oh, great. Thank you.
they'll just be able to be like, boom, Laura Henry Studio. But yeah, seriously, as an actor that's taken it, and it's just been I'm just so excited to get back to it because it's like almost like once you open the door
Yeah.
and you're like, oh wait, this is what it is. This is so fun.
Well, no matter what you're doing as an actor or who you're studying with, you have to do it. You can't sit in your house and say, I'm going to be an actor. You've got to get out there and do it, and audition and take classes and get together and read plays with your classmates or friends or colleagues. You've got to do it. You've just got to do it. You can't. It's not something you can do in your room by yourself, even though you have a lot of homework that needs to be done in your room by yourself. You can't do it there. So that's part of it. So I just love everybody starting theater companies and putting together projects and working on it, just doing it.
Yeah, like actually physically practicing it. And like also what I've learned from you is it doesn't matter where it is or what it is, like do everything all the way. Like it doesn't matter what it is, if it's in your living room or you're with your friends. Like
no, you're working on it. You're whatever you're
right.
doing, you're bringing that integrity to the work. Right.
Well, we're just about at 45 minutes here chatting about acting and about your life. Is there anything, Laura, that you would like to end on or to give advice to young actors or just, something you'd like to leave with the listeners?
No, I mean, I think the important thing is our country doesn't really recognize acting. There's not a national theater in Washington, and there never has been. And there's been a lot of people trying to have that happen. So I find with young people all the time that everybody's so worried. A lot of people may be in their family and stuff. And if this isn't true for you, that's wonderful. That's great. But are worried that it's too risky and it's not. If you really want to be an actor, you have to work your ass off. And then you get to do what you love. And you should follow your heart and do what you love to do. It means you'll be working survival jobs. Maybe it means, it's not about the money. It's not about making $1 million movies, which I'm not knocking. If you get $1 million movies, good for you. That's great. But, and if that's your goal, then go after it. And I hope you get them, but it should be loving the work and loving acting and loving telling stories and being involved in the process, because that's going to give you something for your whole life. That's going to make a difference. I mean, we have such great shows on television now. I don't even have television. I have streaming, but I mean, the work that's been coming out has just been incredible, even with the pandemic, which was just horrible for actors and horrible for the business and horrible for the whole world. So we're just in such a difficult, scary time. And we need more artists in the world to tell the truth and get out there and do what they love.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, especially because acting is a reflection, or art is a reflection of humanity, where we're at, right? And sometimes it can make light of situations, and it can be therapeutic in a way with comedy, and sometimes it can be eye-opening. But the importance of holding up that mirror, and for actors to fully express and truly embody that human experience by telling the truth, is, that's
Right.
what we need right now. We need it in all the ways, every single way.
Have you seen Strange Loop?
Oh, I have not seen Strange Loop yet.
Oh my God, you have to go see that.
Okay.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, I just got back today. I'm gonna.
Oh my God, you cannot. You have to go like tomorrow.
Okay. Okay.
It's fabulous.
All right. Yeah. All right. I thought you were gonna say Stranger Things, and I was like, I've seen that too, but but I have.
No, I'm not talking about television and film now. I was talking about theater. Yeah, there's so many good shows. That's fantastic, though. It's one of the toughest times in the world right now, and yet there's just some great things happening, and there's always what you're going to do tomorrow. You just have to be positive about it and go after what you want. All right, Sarah, thank you so much for having me. I don't really know what I talked about, but I hope it was what you wanted.
Yeah, you did. I mean, you shared who you are and how you view acting, and I think to hear someone that has mastered this and understands it. And I mean, I think you mentioned before, even in class, sometimes actors have a hard time actually like explaining what acting is. Like, because they just
my
do
job
it,
is
right?
to talk about it. Their job is to do it. But I do think they have to understand it. Doesn't mean they can communicate it to somebody else. They have to know what they're doing. That's what, everybody has to know what they're doing. And however you learn that is great, as long as you go, yeah, I know what I'm doing. And if you do, that's good. But the defensiveness, you can't be defensive about it, because it doesn't really matter what anybody else says. It matters what you feel and what you know and why you want to be an actor and all of that stuff. I just think that it's hard sometimes in our country. I mean, in England, they're knighted when they're actors. They're regarded in high esteem. In other countries too, that it is it's possibly because of Shakespeare, but we don't have that legacy in this country. There are some incredible people who are devoted to that legacy, which thank God, but it can get lost. And as a young person, sometimes people get lost in that. Do I really want to take that big risk? And I don't understand the risk in your own life of doing what you want to do. I love my job, and I've loved my job my whole life because I'm doing what I love doing. So that means it doesn't really feel like work. Now, does it feel like work? Sometimes, sure, I get tired, and like everybody does, but I love it. And all my colleagues I've ever worked with feel the same way. And that's everybody on Broadway. I mean, doing 8 shows a week and being a producer on Broadway now, nobody's making any money, but everybody's plugging away and doing what they love to do and doing it well because they know what they're doing.
Yeah, it's like life's got its challenges no matter what, right? But what challenge are you going to choose? Are you going to choose to?
Right, and life is short, so what are you going to do? I mean, we just lost Stephen Sondheim, one of the greatest artists of all time. But he embodied that in everything he wrote and everything he did, and every day he went to see everybody's shows and wrote letters. What an incredible man. What a great artist. There's so many people that young actors can watch and listen to. I mean, we've got so much access to YouTube, is access to interviews with all of these people.
Use the resources.
Just have fun and do what you want to do.
Thanks, Laura.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you have a good one.
You too.
I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Jack of All Trades podcast. As always, don't forget to like and share and leave us a 5-star rating and review. This helps us to get the podcast out to a wider audience so we can keep sharing these stories of all these amazing people who pursue all these different facets of life, bringing together many different experts in different subjects along with people that do multiple things at once. If you or someone you know is a person that pursues multiple things and you'd like to be interviewed on the podcast, or say you know an expert of someone on a subject that we haven't brought on yet that is super wonderful at one thing and would help diversify the subject matter of this podcast, you can recommend them to us. We love hearing more people and bringing new people on. You can email us at jackofalltradespodcast2020@gmail.com. We also just love hearing from our listeners. So if you got something to say, send an email. Hopefully nice things. If you don't have something nice to say, then don't send an email. And also follow us on our socials. Our Instagram is at jackofalltrades_podcast. And we really hope that you guys have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.